Hey, Stewart's Chapel, this is Brother Don Pierson and Don Counts, and we're at Thumper and Alley Pig's place of worship and their home also. I want to share with you a story that normally when I share it takes a lot longer than I'm going to have, and so I'm going to do my best to shorten it. I want to look in Ephesians chapter 6, verses 18, 19, and 20. Paul, writing to the church of Ephesus, praying always with all prayer and supplication in the Spirit, being watchful to this end with all perseverance and supplication for all the saints. And then he changes from this general prayer for everybody, and he says, and for me. Pray for me. And then he tells them exactly what to pray for him. Pray that utterance may be given to me, that I may open my mouth boldly to make known the mystery of the gospel, for which I am an ambassador in chains, that in it I may speak boldly as I ought to speak. A few weeks ago, I did the funeral for my mentor, my first pastor, Max Hetzel. I guess because of having to do the funeral and just mindful of just remembering his presence and his impact in my life. You see, Max did something for me that I have found is actually pretty rare for pastors. Evidently, he saw something in me that, and I don't understand why. You see, most of my years, childhood and school years, I went to speech therapy. I would have, what you would say, had a speech impediment. It still comes out at times. There's still certain words that I avoid because they're just hard for me to speak. Because of that, I also had problems learning Spanish because there's certain ways of pronunciation and words and letters that I have a hard time doing, so I would have to find other words. And I do the same thing in English. That because of certain things that had happened in my childhood, I was pretty much a loner. I've never really had at that time a lot of friends. They were usually, the ones I had were few, but they were close. And they were usually like me. A little awkward socially. Not just because of the stuttering and the fact that the pronunciation of certain words, but because of what people do when you stutter and pronounce words. You learn to be silent. You withdraw. You create a world of your own, and that's what I had done. As a result, I never really dated until Trish, my wife, is really the only woman I ever dated, and that was an act of God. But at some point, Max began to take me with him visiting and hospitals, nursing homes, everywhere he went for about 2 years. Somewhere in the middle of that, our church had a revival. And it was a fall revival. And that preacher that night chose the text in Exodus to preach on about Moses stammering and tongue, and how Moses said that he couldn't do what God wanted to because he couldn't speak. Basically, he's talking to the Creator saying, do you really know what you've done to me? I can't do. You've made a mistake in forming me, and you've made a mistake in calling me. That night, I literally got up and ran to the altar. Well, that's not true. I actually ran to Max Hetzel, my mentor and pastor. He asked me what I wanted, and I told him that I wanted God to open my mouth. I don't know what Max was thinking. I don't even know for sure what I was thinking, but I knew I was where God wanted me to, that God brought me to that place to ask that particular prayer of Max, and Max prayed for me. And literally, God opened my mouth. He opened my mouth so much that He changed my personality. He took an introvert and made him an extrovert. He took a man that was struggled with words to a man that has made his whole 40-some years of ministry in words. He changed me. He changed my personality so much that not long after that event, my wife came to me and asked me if I was always going to be like this. Because the man that I had become was not the man that she had married. And I began to pray that God would do for my wife what He had done for me. And He did. But you see, God opened my mouth. You know, the prayer for boldness and for the words to speak like you ought are common in the New Testament. We don't think of Paul having problems in that, and yet he was constantly asking others to pray that God would open his mouth, to give him the words, that he would be bold with those words and share. I know the power of that prayer. I also know, because I know the power of the prayer, that there is not a single Christian that can blame their personality or the way God has made them for their failure to share the gospel. It is very, very clear God has called all of His children to go and to make disciples, to share the gospel, teaching them the things that Jesus taught His, and we're to do the same. So I wonder if your excuses are not you more blaming God for the way He has made you. Have you ever thought about that? That's what Moses was doing. What a foolish thought, isn't it? To blame God that the thing that God has called you to do, you can't do because somehow God made a mistake with you. You need to get over that. And you need to realize that God's calling you to do what He wants you to do because He has fully made you able to do it. Perhaps the prayer you need to pray is, Lord, open my mouth. Love you, Steers Chapel.